You will never get a single penny. My father-in-law leaned across the heavy courtroom table. His smile was razor thin. His eyes were full of absolute contempt. He thought he had completely won. My husband sat right beside him. He looked so incredibly smug. They had spent years secretly stealing my military pay to build their empire. They thought I was just a broken, silent soldier. They were entirely wrong. I did not yell. I did not cry. I simply handed the judge a sealed white envelope. The judge opened it. He read the first page. Then the entire room went completely silent. What was inside that envelope completely destroyed their arrogant empire in less than 60 seconds. This story is a powerful reminder that human dignity is a fundamental right, and true strength is incredibly quiet. If you deeply believe in absolute justice and mutual respect, please hit the like button. Leave a brave comment down below. Share this video with a woman who desperately needs a lifeline today. And please subscribe to our channel for more powerful journeys. The morning air was thick with promise of rain as I stood outside the imposing stone structure of the federal courthouse. My breath caught slightly in my throat. Today was the day. 15 years of marriage were about to be systematically dismantled inside those heavy oak doors. I smoothed the lapels of my simple gray suit. I had explicitly chosen not to wear my military uniform. The gold oak leaves of my rank were safely tucked away in a velvet box at home. Today, I did not want the judge to see Major Eleanor Brooks. I wanted him to see Eleanor the woman. I wanted him to see the human being who had been quietly erased by the man she loved. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. The hallway smelled of lemon polish. It smelled of stale coffee. It smelled of cold leather. It was the distinct scent of ruined lives and broken promises. My lawyer, Sarah, was already waiting near the security checkpoint. She held a single leather briefcase. She looked sharp. She looked prepared. We walked toward courtroom number 4 in complete silence. Words were unnecessary now. We had spent agonizing months preparing for this exact moment. Across the aisle, they were already seated. Nathan, my husband, the man I had sworn to protect. He looked remarkably relaxed. He wore a custom navy suit that undoubtedly cost more than my first car. Beside him sat his father, Arthur. Arthur was a man who deeply believed wealth was a substitute for character. He leaned heavily on a silver-tipped cane. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I entered the room. He did not attempt to hide his contempt. He wanted me to feel small. He wanted me to remember my place. Beside Nathan sat Victoria. She was the final, cruel piece of the betrayal. She was Nathan's senior executive. She was also his mistress. She wore a tailored white blazer. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. She looked exactly like a woman who had already spent the money she believed they were about to win. I took my seat next to Sarah. I kept my back perfectly straight. The military had taught me how to control my breathing under intense fire. This was just a different kind of war zone. Arthur leaned across the heavy wooden divider separating our tables. His voice was a harsh, gravelly whisper. "You will never get a penny." The cruel words hung in the cold air between us. "After today, you walk out with nothing." We made sure of it. Nathan stared straight ahead. He did not even have the courage to look at me. He let his father do the dirty work. He always had. Victoria smirked. She whispered something into Nathan's ear. He offered a weak, complicit smile. They were so confident. They were entirely convinced that their carefully constructed narrative would easily crush mine. The bailiff announced the arrival of Judge Harrison. We all stood. The judge was an older man with sharp, intelligent eyes. He had a formidable reputation for seeing through courtroom theatrics. I silently hoped that reputation was earned. The proceedings began. Nathan's attorney, a slick, polished man named Vance, stood up to deliver his opening statement. He was a master of manipulation. He painted a beautiful, tragic picture. He described a devoted husband left entirely alone. He described Nathan as a brilliant visionary. A man who built a multi-million-dollar logistics empire from absolute nothingness. He described endless nights of grueling hard work. He described the heavy, solitary burden of entrepreneurship. Then he turned his attention to me. He did not raise his voice. He used a tone of forced sympathy. It was entirely sickening, Your Honor, Vance said smoothly, pacing the floor. Eleanor was a ghost in this marriage. She chose the military over her home. She chose deployments over domestic life. She was simply never here. She did not build Brooks Logistics. She did not suffer the sleepless nights balancing the ledgers or managing the staff. She merely returned home when the hard work was finished, expecting to reap the financial benefits of my client's labor. She is entitled to standard alimony. Nothing more. It was a brilliant, devastating lie. He completely omitted the reality of my service. He made my deployment sound like casual vacations. I remembered the blistering heat of the Afghan sun. I remembered the thick dust clinging to my skin. I remembered sitting in a fortified tent after a 14-hour shift, logging into a secure terminal to transfer my entire combat pay into our joint account. I did it so Nathan could buy his first delivery truck. I did it so he could pay his 2 part-time employees. I sacrificed my youth, my safety, and my presence so he could safely chase a dream. And now, he was weaponizing that very absence against me. Nathan took the stand. He played the victim with terrifying perfection. He spoke extensively about his loneliness. He spoke about how impossibly hard it was to manage a growing company while worrying about his wife overseas. He spoke softly. He looked down at his hands. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Listening to him, a stranger might actually believe he was the injured party. He made me question my own sanity for a brief, terrifying second. That is the true, hidden horror of financial and emotional abuse. It is a quiet, domestic violence. It systematically strips away your reality. It replaces your undeniable truth with their convenient fiction. They desperately wanted to break my spirit. They wanted to strip me of my dignity. But a true marriage is built on mutual respect. It is an equal partnership based on shared human values. Nathan had never wanted a partner. He had wanted a silent sponsor. He had wanted absolute, unquestioned control over his domain. When Nathan finally finished his testimony, Arthur nodded in deep approval. Victoria reached out and squeezed Nathan's hand affectionately. They had delivered their flawless performance. They believed they had effectively severed my legal claim to the life I had built. They thought I was just a tired, broken soldier, finally ready to surrender. They had absolutely no idea what was waiting for them inside the single, unmarked white envelope resting quietly on Sarah's desk. The courtroom settled into a heavy, suffocating silence as Nathan S. attorney confidently took his seat. The air felt unnaturally thick. It was the specific kind of atmosphere that precedes a devastating storm. Sarah slowly stood up. She did not rush. She smoothed her skirt. She picked up a thin, unremarkable file folder. She did not look angry. She looked incredibly calm. This was the exact moment the tide would permanently turn. Your Honor, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly across the polished wood. We respectfully decline to cross-examine Mr. Brooks regarding his emotional state. We are not here to debate hurt feelings. We are here to present a definitive timeline of documented facts. This was our first calculated reversal. Nathan and his lawyer had spent over an hour building a fragile house of emotional cards. We were about to introduce a hurricane. Sarah walked purposefully to the projector. She pulled a single piece of paper from her folder. She placed it flat on the glass. An old email suddenly appeared on the large screen mounted beside the witness stand. It was dated exactly 8 years ago. It was sent from Nathan's personal account directly to my secure military server. Sarah read the words aloud. Her voice was steady, rhythmic, and commanding. Eleanor, the bank denied the commercial loan again. They say I have absolutely no collateral. We are completely finished unless you apply for the Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise Grant. Please, I desperately need your military credential. It is our only chance. The vibrant color instantly drained from Nathan's face. He stared at the glowing screen as if it were a ghost. Arthur gripped the silver handle of his cane so tightly, his knuckles turned stark white. His confident, mocking smile vanished entirely. "Your Honor," Sarah continued, turning squarely toward the bench. "My client secured a federally backed grant specifically designed for veteran-owned businesses. That money, earned through her blood and service, officially launched Brooks Logistics. But the financial foundation did not end there." Sarah removed the email and quickly replaced it with a thick stack of verified banking records. They were undeniable. They were lethal. Every month for 3 consecutive years, Sarah stated, pointing to the highlighted columns. Major Brooks' hazard pay and combat bonuses were deposited directly into the company's primary operating account. Mr. Brooks did not build this company alone. He built it squarely on the back of an active duty soldier. And then, Your Honor, he committed systematic, calculated fraud. The courtroom collectively gasped. The judge leaned sharply forward, peering intensely over his wire-rimmed glasses. This was the second devastating reversal. Sarah did not give them a single moment to breathe. She produced a brand new set of documents, incorporation papers, 5 years ago, while my client was actively deployed in a combat zone. Mr. Brooks quietly restructured the entire corporation. He intentionally forged Eleanor's signature to permanently remove her from the board of directors. He then transferred the primary, high-yield assets into an impenetrable family trust, a trust completely controlled by his father, Arthur Brooks. Victoria shifted highly uncomfortably in her leather chair. She looked at Nathan with wide, panicked eyes. For the very first time, the polished, ruthless executive looked genuinely terrified. She was suddenly realizing that she was not partnering with a brilliant business mastermind. She was tethered to a desperate, careless thief. Arthur S. Attorney jumped up, his heavy chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Objection. This is a complete legal ambush. My client's mental state is clearly documented. Eleanor is suffering from severe military trauma. She is medically unstable and highly paranoid. It was a pathetic, last-ditch effort. They were actively trying to weaponize my service trauma against me. I did not break. I did not shed a single tear. I simply looked directly at Judge Harrison." Sarah handed the judge a heavy, tightly sealed medical file. "These are Major Brooks's official, classified military psychological evaluations. They span the last 10 years in meticulous detail. She possesses exemplary mental fortitude. She is perfectly clear. The only instability in this entire marriage was her husband's profoundly broken moral compass." Judge Harrison struck his wooden gavel hard. "Overruled. Counsel, proceed immediately." Nathan was rapidly crumbling. Arthur looked physically ill. The false narrative of the absent, unstable wife was completely and utterly destroyed. But Sarah and I were not finished. We had one final, absolute truth to deliver. "Your Honor," Sarah said softly, changing the rhythm of the room. "My client has chosen not to testify verbally today. She firmly believes the forensic evidence speaks volumes. However, she has written a personal statement. She respectfully asks the court to review it alongside our final, sealed exhibit." I stood up. I picked up the white envelope. I walked the short distance to the elevated bench. My hands were perfectly steady. I handed the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The courtroom was dead silent. You could clearly hear the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. You could hear Arthur S. Ragged. Shallow breathing. Judge Harrison broke the heavy wax seal. He pulled out 2 pieces of paper. He began to carefully read my letter. I had written extensively about dignity. I had written about the fundamental human right to be treated with basic respect by the person you trust most in the world. I explicitly explained that stealing a spouse's security is not just bad business strategy. It is a profound moral failure. It is a vicious act of domestic betrayal that destroys the human soul. As the judge read, the deep lines on his face hardened. He stopped for a very long moment. He then looked down at the second piece of paper. It was a certified forensic accounting report. It explicitly proved that Nathan and Victoria had used embezzled company funds to purchase a luxury vacation home in Aspen. They had bought it with money legally belonging to our shared marital estate. The judge went completely silent. He stared at the paper for what felt like an absolute eternity. The silence stretched across the vast room, heavy and absolute. It was the distinct sound of approaching justice. Finally, Judge Harrison slowly removed his glasses. He looked directly at Arthur. "You swore she would not get a penny," the judge said softly, his voice carrying a highly dangerous edge. "You are sorely mistaken." The final ruling was swift and entirely devastating. Judge Harrison pierced the corporate veil. He completely invalidated the fraudulent and family trust. He officially awarded me 60% of the company's total valuation. He aggressively ordered Nathan to pay full, immediate restitution for the stolen combat pay. He placed an immediate legal lien on the Aspen property. Nathan buried his face in his hands and sobbed openly. Arthur sat frozen. His towering arrogance shattered into dust. Victoria abruptly stood up, grabbed her designer briefcase, and walked quickly out of the courtroom without a single backward glance. I stood up. I smoothed my gray suit one last time. I felt an overwhelming sense of profound peace. I walked past Arthur without offering a single word. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors and stepped safely out into the afternoon light. The sun was incredibly warm against my skin. True healing does not happen overnight. The deep scars of betrayal permanently change how you view the world. But standing there, breathing the clean, free air, I realized a fundamental truth. You simply cannot heal in the same toxic environment that broke you. You must bravely step into the light. Every human being deserves profound, unwavering respect. We deeply deserve relationships built on true equality, not cruel exploitation. True strength is never loud. It is the quiet patience to gather the truth. It is the profound courage to stand clearly in the light and say, "I am worth far more than this." The morning after the verdict felt entirely different. The air outside was incredibly crisp. The suffocating, heavy weight in my chest was permanently gone. I woke up at exactly 5 o'clock. My military internal clock never truly faded. But today, there was no lingering dread. There was only absolute, undeniable clarity. I put on a sharp black suit. I polished my shoes until they reflected the morning light. I poured a single cup of dark coffee. I stood by my kitchen window and watched the sun rise over the quiet city. Today was not about petty revenge. Revenge is a messy, uncontrolled emotion. Today was about professional execution. It was about taking rightful ownership of my life. It was about firmly enforcing the strict boundaries of human dignity. For 15 years, my existence had been minimized. For 15 years, my dangerous service had been treated as a convenient funding source. That era was completely over. I drove to the corporate headquarters of Brooks Logistics. The glass building stood tall against the bright blue sky. It was a massive structure built entirely on a foundation of my stolen combat pay. I parked my car in the front executive row. I did not ask for permission. I walked through the heavy revolving doors. The main lobby was bright and modern. The receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, looked up from her polished desk. Her eyes widened in sheer panic. The news of the devastating court ruling had clearly spread through the corporate grapevine. I did not smile. I did not scowl. I maintained a perfectly neutral, commanding expression. I walked directly past the security desk. The guards did not attempt to stop me. They understood the shifting dynamics of absolute power. I stepped into the private executive elevator. I pressed the button for the top floor. The metal doors slid shut. The quiet hum of the machinery was the only sound. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the penthouse suite. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway. I opened the heavy double doors to the primary corner office. Nathan was standing frantically behind the massive mahogany desk. He was frantically shoving files and loose papers into a brown cardboard box. He looked completely shattered. His expensive designer suit was deeply wrinkled. His tie was pulled loose. He possessed dark, heavy circles under his bloodshot eyes. He froze completely when I entered the room. He looked at me with the terrified expression of a trapped animal. "You do not belong in this office anymore," I said softly. My voice was incredibly calm. It was the precise tone I used in active combat zones. It left absolutely no room for negotiation. Nathan swallowed hard. His hands shook violently. "Eleanor, please. I built this specific network. I know all the vendor contracts. You cannot possibly run this massive operation alone. I managed billion-dollar supply chains in active war zones," I replied evenly. "I coordinated dangerous airdrops under heavy hostile fire. I think I can confidently manage a fleet of civilian delivery trucks. Put the files down. Nathan, you are legally trespassing on my property." He dropped the heavy folders. They scattered chaotically across the polished desk. Too large. Uniformed corporate security officers stepped into the office behind me. I had legally retained them earlier that morning. "Please escort Mr. Brooks directly to the street." I instructed them without breaking eye contact with Nathan. "He is no longer an employee or an owner of this corporation. He is not permitted to take any proprietary documents." Nathan did not fight back. The absolute cowardice that had defined his secret betrayals now defined his public exit. He picked up his single cardboard box. He walked slowly out of the office. He looked small. He looked entirely defeated. I did not feel pity. Pity requires a foundation of basic respect. He had deliberately forfeited that respect years ago. I walked around the large desk. I sat down in the heavy leather chair. I looked out the massive panoramic window. The entire city stretched out below me. I picked up the sleek office phone. I pressed the button for the internal corporate intercom. My voice echoed cleanly through every hallway and every office in the entire building. "This is Major Eleanor Brooks," I announced calmly. "Effective immediately. I am the majority owner and the acting chief executive officer of this company. We are scheduling an emergency all-hands meeting in the main atrium in exactly 10 minutes. The culture of this corporation changes today, from this exact moment forward. This business will operate on absolute transparency. It will operate on fundamental human equality. It will operate on mutual respect. Anyone who cannot fully commit to those basic human values is freely welcome to walk out the door right now." I placed the phone down on the receiver. The silence in the office was profoundly beautiful. It was the sound of a completely new beginning. The deep trauma of financial abuse is designed to make you feel powerless. It is a systematic, cruel effort to erase your personal agency. But true power is never truly lost. It merely waits patiently for you to bravely claim it back. I opened the top drawer of the mahogany desk. I took out a blank notepad. I picked up a silver pen. I began to carefully write the new operational directives for my company. I was finally breathing free air. 6 months later, I stood on a sweeping, snow-dusted ridge in Colorado. The air at this high altitude was incredibly thin. It was freezing and sharp against my cheeks. It smelled purely of pine needles and expensive, quiet isolation. Directly behind me stood the massive luxury vacation home in Aspen. It was a stunning piece of modern architecture. It featured towering glass walls and dark cedar beams. It was the exact house Nathan and Victoria had secretly purchased. It was the physical monument to their towering greed. It was the exact location where they had selfishly spent the money I had earned dodging mortar fire in a foreign desert. I stood on the expansive wooden deck. I wrapped my heavy wool coat much tighter around my shoulders. I did not feel any lingering anger as I looked at the property. Anger is an exhausting, heavy emotion. I only felt a deep, profound sense of finality. I walked slowly through the massive living room. My heavy boots echoed sharply against the imported hardwood floors. The interior was incredibly cold. It was modern and entirely devoid of a human soul. Victoria had personally chosen all the expensive furnishings. The house looked exactly like her. It was beautiful on the absolute surface, but completely empty and hollow on the inside. My real estate agent, a sharp professional named David, waited patiently in the pristine kitchen. He had a stack of thick legal documents arranged neatly on the marble counter. The final wire transfer just successfully cleared the bank. "Eleanor," David said with a warm, respectful smile, The new buyers are thrilled. The money is officially sitting securely in your accounts. You just need to sign the final closing disclosures. I picked up the heavy black pen. I signed my name precisely on the dotted line. I did not hesitate for a single fraction of a second. The immense profit from the sale of this stolen property was not going into my personal bank account. I had absolutely no desire to keep this tainted money. Instead, I had legally established a brand new philanthropic foundation. It was specifically designed to provide emergency financial grants, legal representation, and psychological counseling to female military veterans who were experiencing severe domestic and financial abuse. I was aggressively taking the exact resources that were brutally weaponized against me, and I was using them to actively free other women. This is how you truly win the war. You do not just survive the brutal betrayal. You do not just silently walk away with your legal share. You actively transform the deep trauma into undeniable power. You create a protective shield for the people coming up directly behind you. Human rights are not just abstract, lofty concepts written on legal paper. They are tangible actions. They are the fundamental right to safety. They are the fundamental right to financial independence. They are the right to walk away from toxic manipulation without losing your basic human dignity. I walked out of the Aspen house for the very last time. I locked the heavy front door. I handed the bright silver keys to David. I climbed into the driver's seat of my waiting car. I began the long, winding drive down the steep mountain. The towering pine trees rushed past my windows. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting a brilliant, fiery glow across the snow-capped peaks. I thought about Arthur Brooks. He had lost his entire family legacy because of his blinding, arrogant pride. I thought about Nathan. He was currently facing severe federal audits for his extensive corporate fraud. He had lost his company. He had lost his wealth. He had lost his mistress, who had immediately abandoned him the moment the money officially vanished. They had gambled their entire existence on the false assumption that I was weak. They had fatally mistaken my quiet patience for foolish surrender. They never understood the fundamental strength of a soldier. We do not panic under heavy fire. We do not scream when the enemy advances. We simply hold the line. We meticulously gather our resources. We patiently wait for the exact right moment to strike. And when we finally move, we move with absolute, devastating precision. If you are listening to this story right now, and you feel entirely trapped in the dark, if someone is systematically trying to erase your immense value, if they are quietly stealing your light to aggressively fuel their own selfish ambitions, please listen to my words very carefully. You are not broken. You are not foolish. You are simply holding the line. Keep gathering your absolute truth. Keep documenting the hidden facts. Protect your inner peace with everything you have. There will eventually come a day when the courtroom doors close. There will come a day when the judge finally reads your undeniable evidence. And on that day, the people who brutally tried to destroy you will go completely silent. They will finally realize that they never actually held the real power. The power was always waiting patiently inside of you. Stand up, speak your truth, demand your absolute equality, and never, ever let anyone tell you that you do not deserve a single penny of the beautiful life you have bravely built. The transformation of Brooks Logistics did not happen overnight. Healing a poisoned environment requires time. It requires immense, unwavering discipline. For the first 3 months, the corporate office felt like a fragile ecosystem. The employees were deeply accustomed to Nathan's chaotic reign. They were used to sudden screaming matches. They were used to secret meetings behind heavy, locked doors. They were conditioned to fear leadership. I systematically tore those heavy doors off their hinges. I ordered the maintenance crew to replace the solid mahogany doors of the executive suites with clear, reinforced glass. Transparency is not just a corporate buzzword. It is a fundamental human right in the workplace. It is the absolute foundation of mutual respect. If a leader cannot conduct their business in the clear light of day, they have absolutely no business leading people. I spent the entire first year auditing every single vendor contract. Nathan had operated on a system of toxic cronyism. He signed terrible deals with men who simply stroked his fragile ego. One of those men was Marcus Sterling. Marcus was the CEO of our largest freight partner. He was a wealthy, arrogant man who had proudly played golf with Arthur Brooks for 20 years. Marcus walked into my glass office on a rainy Tuesday morning in late October. He did not knock. He simply pushed the door open. He carried a leather folder and wore a condescending smirk. He looked at me exactly the way Arthur used to look at me. He looked at me as if I were merely a temporary placeholder. He assumed I was a foolish, emotional woman who was entirely out of her depth. "Eleanor," Marcus said loudly, dropping his heavy folder onto my pristine desk. He did not address me by my proper title. It was a calculated, deliberate act of disrespect. I brought the contract renewals. I went ahead and factored in an 8% rate increase. It is standard industry practice. Just sign on the bottom line. Let us keep the trucks moving. I did not touch his folder. I did not offer him a seat. I simply looked at him. I maintained a perfectly neutral, unblinking expression. In the military, we call this the command presence. It is the ability to dominate a space without raising your voice a single decibel. Marcus shifted his weight. His confident smirk faltered slightly. The silence in the office grew incredibly heavy. "I am not signing your contract, Marcus," I said evenly. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a perfectly sharpened blade. Marcus scoffed. He crossed his arms over his chest. "Listen here, sweetheart. You cannot run a national supply chain without my fleet." Nathan understood that. Arthur understood that. "Do not play business with me." I opened my top drawer. I pulled out a thick, meticulously organized red binder. I placed it gently on the desk between us. "This is a comprehensive, independent audit of your freight operations over the last 4 years," I explained calmly. "You have consistently inflated our invoices by 12%. You have systematically underpaid your female dispatchers. You have a documented history of severe workplace harassment claims that you buried with aggressive non-disclosure agreements." Marcus turned a pale shade of gray. He uncrossed his arms. He reached for the binder, but I placed my hand firmly on top of it. "I do not do business with thieves," I stated cleanly. "And I absolutely do not do business with men who fundamentally disrespect the basic human dignity of their workforce. True success is never built on the active subjugation of others. It is built on equality. It is built on safety. Your corporate culture is a toxic liability. Our partnership is permanently terminated. You have exactly 30 days to offload our current freight before our legal transition is complete." Marcus opened his mouth to scream. He wanted to rage. He wanted to use his size and his loud voice to intimidate me back into submission. But he looked into my eyes, and he saw absolutely nothing he could break. He saw a veteran who had stood steady under mortar fire. He saw a woman who had already survived the worst betrayal imaginable and walked out completely intact. He snatched his leather folder off my desk. He turned around and stormed out of the glass office. My senior management team was standing in the hallway. They had heard the entire exchange through the open door. They looked at me with a profound, quiet awe. They had never seen a bully dismantled so cleanly. I stood up from my desk. I walked out into the main hallway. I looked at the incredible men and women who kept my company running every single day. "We are building something entirely different here," I told them. My voice carried clearly through the open space. "We are building an empire based on absolute integrity. Never let anyone tell you that ruthlessness is required for success. Compassion is a competitive advantage. Respect is a competitive advantage. From this day forward, we demand excellence, but we demand basic human decency first. We protect our own." The energy in the building completely shifted in that exact moment. The lingering ghost of Nathan's abuse was permanently exorcised. The employees did not just work for a paycheck anymore. They worked for a deeply shared vision. They worked for a place where their dignity was fiercely protected. I returned to my desk. I sat down and looked out at the rainy city skyline. I felt a deep, warm sense of absolute peace. The war was completely over. The beautiful, quiet era of rebuilding had officially begun. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I stood behind a heavy velvet curtain in a grand ballroom in downtown Chicago. The room was filled with hundreds of people. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden light across the elegant tables. This was the inaugural gala for the Eleanor Vanguard Foundation, the philanthropic organization I had built using the massive profits from the sale of Nathan's stolen Aspen house. The foundation had one strict, uncompromising mission. We provided immediate, untraceable financial grants, top-tier legal representation, and intense psychological support to female military veterans escaping domestic and financial abuse. We were a quiet, powerful army of women pulling each other out of the brutal dark. My lawyer, Sarah, stood right beside me. She looked absolutely stunning in a dark emerald gown. She had recently joined the foundation's board of directors. She touched my arm gently. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I nodded. I have been ready for my entire life. Before I could step onto the stage, a young woman nervously approached me in the backstage shadows. She wore a simple black dress. She looked incredibly tired. Her eyes held the distinct, haunted look of someone whose reality had been systematically dismantled. I recognized that look instantly. It was the exact face I used to see in my own mirror. "Major Brooks," the young woman whispered. Her voice was trembling. "My name is Jessica. I was a combat medic. I just left my husband yesterday. He controlled every single penny of my disability checks. He told me I was crazy. He told me no one would ever believe a broken soldier. I have absolutely nothing. I do not even have a place to sleep tonight." I stepped forward immediately. I did not offer her empty platitudes. I did not offer her a sad, sympathetic smile. I took both of her shaking hands in mine. I squeezed them firmly to ground her. "Listen to me, Jessica," I said fiercely, my voice steady and completely absolute. "You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are a highly trained survivor. He stole your money, but he absolutely did not steal your immense power. You belong to a sisterhood now. We do not leave our wounded behind." I turned to my trusted executive assistant standing nearby. "Get Jessica a secure room at the hotel upstairs. Authorize an immediate emergency transition grant. Connect her with our primary legal team first thing tomorrow morning." I looked back at Jessica. Tears were streaming freely down her face. The heavy, suffocating weight was finally beginning to lift from her shoulders. "You are safe now," I promised her. "Your new life begins right this second." The gala host called my name over the loudspeakers. The massive crowd erupted into thunderous applause. I let go of Jessica's hands. I walked past the heavy velvet curtain and stepped squarely into the bright, blinding spotlight. I walked to the elegant wooden podium. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw survivors. I saw fierce advocates. I saw women who had bravely reclaimed their stolen dignity. The room fell completely silent. They were waiting for me to speak. "They tell you that a courtroom is where the truth finally wins," I began. My voice echoed powerfully through the massive ballroom. "They are wrong. The truth does not win in a courtroom. The truth wins in the quiet, agonizing moments when you look at yourself in the mirror and finally decide that you are worth protecting. It wins when you refuse to be diminished. It wins when you fiercely demand your fundamental human equality." I paused, letting the heavy words settle over the absolute silence of the crowd. "Financial abuse is a silent, creeping violence," I continued, staring directly into the camera recording the event. "It does not always leave a physical bruise. It leaves a shattered soul. It is designed to strip you of your agency. It is designed to make you believe that your immense sacrifices mean absolutely nothing. For years, I was told that my dangerous military service was an inconvenience. I was told that I did not build the life I was actively paying for. I was betrayed by the person I trusted most in this world." I gripped the edges of the podium. But I learned a magnificent truth in the darkest part of my life. True strength is not found in screaming match. It is not found in cruel threats. True strength is incredibly quiet. It is the deep patience to meticulously gather the facts. It is the unbreakable discipline to hold your ground. It is the absolute courage to stand in the harsh light and firmly declare, "You will never take another piece of my spirit." I looked directly into the lens of the recording camera, speaking directly to the women watching from their screens at home. If you are watching this right now, and you feel entirely trapped, if you are sitting in the dark, wondering if you are crazy because someone you deeply love is quietly erasing your reality, hear me now. You are absolutely brilliant. You have inherent, undeniable value. Your human dignity is your birthright. Do not let a coward convince you that you are invisible. You must fiercely protect your peace. You must document your absolute truth. Never surrender your financial power to anyone who does not deeply respect your soul. The crowd was completely breathless. Some women were crying quietly. Some women were nodding with fierce, undeniable agreement. Healing is not a gentle process, I concluded, my voice dropping to a powerful, resonant register. It is a deliberate, difficult climb out of the deep trenches, but the air at the very top is so incredibly sweet. We are building an army of survivors. We are taking the exact resources that were meant to destroy us, and we are using them to set the whole world on fire. Stand up, speak your quiet truth, and never, ever let anyone tell you that you do not deserve a beautiful, entirely free life. The ballroom erupted. The standing ovation was deafening. It was not a polite applause. It was a fierce, collective roar of absolute liberation. I stood at the podium and smiled. I was no longer a ghost in my own story. I was the author. Thank you for listening to this profound journey today. If Eleanor's incredible story gave you a spark of courage, please leave a comment below. Tell us where you are watching from. Share your own brave story of survival. You never know whose life you might completely save just by proving they are not alone. Please subscribe to this channel and share this powerful video with a woman who desperately needs to hear it. Remember, your personal security is your absolute responsibility. Stay fiercely engaged in your own life. Stay incredibly strong. We will see you in the next story. The Eleanor Vanguard Foundation did not simply write charitable checks. We built an impenetrable, highly structured fortress. We became a highly coordinated tactical unit. Financial abuse thrives in complete, terrifying isolation. It relies on the deep, manufactured shame of the victim. It heavily relies on their absolute physical and mental exhaustion. We deliberately and aggressively broke that isolation. We provided the heavy armor they desperately needed. 3 years after our massive inaugural gala, our primary operation was running at peak military efficiency. We proudly operated a secure, highly encrypted 24-hour crisis hotline. We permanently employed a dozen aggressive financial forensic investigators. We retained the sharpest, most ruthless family law attorneys in the entire state. We did not just politely negotiate with abusers. We completely overwhelmed them with undeniable, catastrophic legal force. We proved that human rights are not optional. The fundamental right to physical safety and financial independence is absolute. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon when the red phone finally rang. The red phone's a strictly encrypted line kept directly on my heavy mahogany desk. It was exclusively reserved for critical, high-risk extractions. I answered it immediately. The voice on the other end was a harsh, completely terrified whisper. Her name was Clara. She was a highly decorated former Navy nurse. She had bravely served 3 demanding combat tours overseas. She had successfully saved countless lives under heavy enemy artillery fire. But now, she was entirely trapped inside a sprawling, heavily gated mansion in elite Connecticut. Her husband, Richard, was a prominent, incredibly wealthy orthopedic surgeon. He was a celebrated pillar of the local high society. He was also a ruthless, calculating monster securely behind closed doors. He had systematically drained Clara's military pension. He had secretly transferred all their joint marital assets into heavily hidden offshore accounts. He rigidly monitored her digital phone. He violently tracked her personal vehicle. He actively isolated her from every single friend and family member. He repeatedly told her that no court would ever believe a traumatized veteran over a deeply respected doctor. He was tragically, entirely wrong. He had not intelligently accounted for the massive power of our sisterhood. Clara had miraculously managed to steal a cheap prepaid burner phone. She carefully found our hidden emergency number through a covert veteran support network. She told me she had exactly a 2-hour window while her husband was performing a complex spinal surgery. We did not hesitate for a single, solitary second. I immediately deployed our aggressive rapid response protocol. I did not just send a generic, highly visible taxi cab. I strategically leveraged the massive operational power of Brooks Logistics. I immediately dispatched a heavy commercial delivery truck directly to her highly monitored luxury estate. The prominent Brooks Logistics logo was painted brightly on the side. The strict neighborhood security guards lazily waved the heavy truck through the iron gates without asking a single question. They completely expected a routine furniture delivery. They did not expect what was actually waiting securely inside the dark cargo bay. Two of my absolute toughest security specialists were driving the vehicle. Both women were highly trained combat veterans. They moved with absolute, terrifying precision. They pulled the large truck quickly into Clara's long circular driveway. They expertly bypassed the external security cameras. They moved Clara safely into the back of the heavy truck in under 4 minutes. They did not pack any heavy clothes. They did not pack any expensive furniture. They only packed Clara and a single, vital folder of hidden financial documents she had managed to secretly copy. Clara was physically shaking violently when they finally arrived at our highly secure safe house located deep in the countryside. I was patiently waiting for her on the wooden front porch. I wrapped a heavy, incredibly warm blanket tightly around her trembling shoulders. I looked directly into her terrified, exhausted eyes. "You are permanently off the grid," Clara, I told her softly but incredibly firmly. "He cannot technologically track you here. He cannot physically hurt you here. You have a massive, heavily armed armies standing directly between him and you." The very next morning, Sarah unleashed absolute, devastating legal hell. We filed an aggressive emergency restraining order. We immediately filed ruthless divorce proceedings. Our forensic accountants swiftly froze the surgeon's massive medical practice accounts using the stolen documents Clara provided. We hit him with a devastating barrage of legal injunctions before he even realized his terrified wife was completely gone. He arrogantly tried to fight back. He hired incredibly expensive, aggressive corporate lawyers. He tried to loudly smear Clara's mental health in the local society press. But we completely controlled the public narrative. We systematically released the undeniable. Hard evidence of his massive financial crimes directly to the state medical board. We exposed his massive, calculated fraud in the bright, burning light of day. Within 3 short weeks, his prestigious medical career was entirely, permanently ruined. He was actively facing severe federal criminal indictments. Clara proudly walked away with her full military pension legally restored. She walked away with her rightful half of the massive marital estate. She walked away with her absolute, beautiful freedom. 5 full years have officially passed since the heavy wooden doors of that courtroom finally closed securely behind me. Time is a deeply fascinating, incredible thing. It does not simply heal massive, traumatic wounds. It actively, powerfully transforms them. It miraculously turns deep, agonizing scars into tough, impenetrable armor. I sat quietly on the wide back porch of my new home. It was a modest, incredibly beautiful farmhouse located far outside the loud, chaotic noise of the city. I absolutely did not need a sprawling, cold mansion to proudly prove my worth. I only needed a quiet space that belonged entirely to me. I held a warm cup of herbal tea. I watched the golden afternoon sun slowly dip below the distant, rolling green hills. The evening air was incredibly, profoundly peaceful. It was a beautiful peace that I had fiercely fought for. It was a profound peace that I had successfully, permanently earned. The Eleanor Vanguard Foundation is now a massive, powerful national organization. We have officially helped over 2,000 female veterans permanently escape horrific financial and emotional abuse. We have successfully recovered tens of millions of dollars in stolen marital assets. We have actively changed fundamental state laws regarding financial coercion and domestic control. But the massive numbers on the spreadsheets are not the true, lasting victory. The actual, profound victory is the loud, joyful laughter I distinctly hear ringing through the bright hallways of our safe houses. The absolute victory is watching a completely broken, terrified woman slowly learn how to stand up incredibly straight again. The ultimate victory is actively watching fundamental human dignity being powerfully, permanently restored to those who had it stolen. Earlier this beautiful morning, I received a carefully handwritten letter in the mail. It was directly from Jessica. She was the terrified young combat medic I had met backstage at our massive inaugural gala all those years ago. Her blue handwriting was perfectly steady. She proudly wrote that she had just successfully graduated from a prestigious nursing school. She had independently purchased a small, comfortable home completely with her own earned money. She wrote that she finally felt incredibly safe, strong and powerful in her own skin. She deeply thanked me for profoundly saving her life. I carefully folded the heavy paper. I placed it gently into a carved wooden box resting on my desk. I absolutely did not save her life. I merely handed her the heavy, necessary tools. She bravely did the incredibly hard work of actually saving herself. That is the fundamental, beautiful truth about sheer human resilience. You absolutely possess the inherent, massive power to completely rebuild your shattered world. Society often heavily conditions women to quietly accept significantly less than they truly deserve. It dangerously conditions us to quietly endure blatant disrespect merely to keep a toxic peace. But true, lasting peace requires absolute, undeniable justice. True peace strictly requires a solid foundation of unwavering, fundamental equality. When you actively allow someone to continuously violate your financial boundaries, you are silently allowing them to slowly erode your fundamental human rights. You must loudly refuse to be a silent, forgotten casualty in someone else's selfish war. You must aggressively demand the profound respect that you inherently deserve as a living, breathing human being. As the final, golden light of the evening faded into the dark, I felt a deep, overwhelming sense of profound gratitude. The heavy, suffocating nightmare of Nathan and Arthur Brooks was absolutely nothing more than a distant, heavily faded memory. They were entirely powerless ghosts. They had brutally, aggressively tried to bury me in the dark. They had completely forgotten that I was a tough, resilient seed. I had rapidly grown into a massive, unyielding tree. I had grown deep, completely unbreakable roots. If you are listening to this powerful story tonight, I heavily need you to completely internalize this message. If you are currently sitting in a cold, dark room, quietly calculating how to barely survive another terrible day with a partner who systematically drains your bright light, if you are being repeatedly, cruelly told that your immense sacrifices are completely worthless, please deeply listen to my steady voice. You are a profoundly powerful, unstoppable force of nature. You are absolutely not trapped. The invisible chains heavily holding you are made entirely of lies. You simply have to bravely decide to stand up and forcefully break them. Start heavily documenting every single detail today. Start quietly building your secure, brilliant exit strategy. Reach out to the massive, powerful network of women who are actively waiting to safely catch you. It will be the most terrifying thing you ever do, but I absolutely promise you, the clean, free air safely on the other side is absolutely worth every single tear. Thank you for listening to my incredible journey. Thank you for holding safe space for this vital truth. If this powerful story deeply moved you, please leave a comment below. Share your quiet victories. Share your loud, beautiful triumphs. Please generously subscribe to this channel and share this video with a woman who desperately needs a lifeline today. Fiercely protect your peace. Fiercely protect your profound dignity. And never, ever surrender your beautiful light. We will see you in the very next story. The seasons changed rapidly. The foundation grew exponentially. We were no longer just a small crisis response team. We became a formidable legislative force. Financial abuse was a quiet, insidious epidemic. It was heavily hidden behind heavy, closed doors. It was completely protected by outdated, weak legal statutes. I desperately wanted to change the very fabric of the law. I wanted to make financial coercion a severe, aggressively punishable felony. My dedicated legal team worked tirelessly around the clock. We drafted comprehensive, ironclad legislative proposals. We aggressively lobbied powerful state senators. We absolutely refused to be ignored or dismissed. It was a brutally brisk morning in early November. I walked slowly up the massive marble steps of the state capitol building. The winter wind was incredibly biting. I wore my signature dark gray suit. Sarah walked closely beside me. She carried a thick, heavy leather briefcase. It was filled with undeniable, empirical data. It was densely packed with the tragic, verified stories of thousands of women. Today, I was actively testifying before the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee. I was fiercely demanding sweeping legal reform. The grand committee room smelled deeply of old wood and political stagnation. It felt remarkably similar to the heavy courtroom where my entire life had completely changed. The powerful committee members sat incredibly high on an elevated wooden bench. They looked down at the small witness table. Some looked incredibly bored. Some looked actively, openly hostile. The committee chairman was a wealthy, deeply entrenched politician named Senator Hayes. He had a prominent reputation for fiercely protecting large corporate interests. He absolutely did not care about domestic financial abuse. He publicly viewed our massive legislative proposal as a frivolous, minor domestic dispute issue. He fundamentally, dangerously misunderstood the severe violation of basic human rights. I sat firmly at the wooden witness table. I carefully adjusted the small black microphone. The grand room was packed tightly with political reporters. It was packed with our fierce foundation supporters. The red recording light blinked on. Major Brooks. Senator Hayes began smoothly. His tone was highly patronizing and completely dismissive. We have reviewed your extensive proposal. It is very passionate. It is very emotional. But the law absolutely cannot regulate every single marital argument over money. We simply cannot criminalize a bad marriage. I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice a single fraction. I leaned precisely 1 inch closer to the microphone. We are absolutely not discussing a bad marriage. Senator, I stated clearly. The massive room instantly fell completely silent. We are discussing the systematic, calculated destruction of a human life. We are aggressively discussing the deliberate theft of veteran benefits. We are discussing fundamental human rights. Financial abuse is absolutely not an argument over a simple grocery bill. It is a severe, intentional form of quiet domestic terrorism. Senator Hayes frowned deeply. He shifted highly uncomfortably in his large leather chair. He was not used to being challenged so cleanly. When a person weaponizes money to completely trap their partner, I continued rhythmically, my voice carrying immense, undeniable weight. They are actively stripping away their basic human dignity. They are deliberately denying them the fundamental, constitutional right to safety. They are denying them the absolute right to equal liberty. My foundation has physically rescued over 2,000 female veterans. These incredible women survived active, dangerous war zones. They survived improvised explosive devices. But they were completely, utterly broken by husbands who legally stole their military pensions and trapped them securely in their own homes. I opened my red leather folder. I pulled out a single, stark photograph. It was the heavily bruised, deeply emaciated face of a veteran we had recently extracted. I held it up for the entire committee to clearly see. This is not a simple domestic dispute, I declared fiercely. This is a profound, catastrophic moral failure of our current legal system. If you do not legally recognize financial coercion as a severe, punishable crime, or actively protecting the abusers, you are quietly telling every single woman in this state that her economic safety is entirely worthless. We are loudly demanding equal protection under the strict letter of the law. The silence in the Grand Committee room was absolutely deafening. The reporters frantically typed on their glowing laptops. The brave women in the gallery stood up in complete, unified solidarity. Senator Hayes looked nervously around the heavy room. He saw the sheer, undeniable power of our massive movement. He instantly realized he was absolutely on the wrong side of history. The new bill passed the committee unanimously the very next morning. We completely changed the law. We successfully built a permanent, ironclad legal shield for the most vulnerable. The massive legislative victory marked a profound, permanent shift in my life. I was no longer just a quiet survivor of horrific abuse. I was a prominent, powerful architect of massive systemic change. But my absolute quietest moments were always my most vital. I sat warmly by the stone fireplace in my quiet farmhouse. The heavy winter snow fell gently outside the large glass window. The fire cracked and popped warmly in the dark room. I thought deeply about the long, brutal road that had successfully led me here. I want to speak directly to you right now. I want to purposefully use these final moments to actively impart the vital, life-saving lessons this brutal journey taught me. Life will inevitably test your absolute limits. People you deeply, truly trust will sometimes fail you completely. They will attempt to actively diminish your incredible worth. They will quietly steal your hard-earned resources to aggressively build their own empires. They will coldly tell you that you are absolutely nothing without them. That is the greatest, most toxic lie ever told. You are a complete, undeniable, powerful universe all on your own. The absolute most profound lesson I learned is about the true definition of basic human respect. Respect is absolutely not a luxury. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable human right. True equality in a relationship is not a special bonus. It is the absolute, bare minimum requirement. If someone repeatedly attempts to aggressively control your finances, they are actively trying to control your physical freedom. They are attempting to permanently clip your wings so you can never fly away from their abuse. You must fiercely, unapologetically guard your financial independence. You must actively educate yourself about every single penny that has your name attached to it. We also need to deeply understand the immense, devastating power of quiet patience. The loud world constantly demands immediate, emotional reactions. The chaotic world wants you to scream loudly when you are deeply hurt, but true, devastating power is cultivated in total, absolute silence. When Nathan and Arthur attempted to completely destroy me, I absolutely did not rage. I meticulously prepared. I quietly gathered the undeniable, hard truth. I waited patiently for the precise, perfect moment to strike. You're quiet. Unyielding discipline is your absolute greatest weapon against a chaotic, noisy abuser. Furthermore, true healing is a massive community effort. You simply cannot truly heal in complete, dark isolation. You must bravely reach out your shaking hand. You must deeply trust that there is a massive, powerful sisterhood waiting to firmly catch you. We are all deeply connected by our shared, agonizing pain. We are fiercely connected by our shared, unbreakable resilience. True human compassion is a fierce, highly active force. It is the powerful, beautiful act of pulling someone out of the dark and loudly reminding them of their inherent, beautiful dignity. You completely deserve a life filled with profound, unwavering peace. You deserve a partner who loudly celebrates your massive strength instead of deeply fearing it. You absolutely deserve every single penny of the incredible success you work so incredibly hard to build. Never, ever let a desperate, small-minded person deliberately make you feel small. Stand up incredibly tall. Speak your absolute truth. And never stop fiercely fighting for the beautiful, peaceful life you inherently deserve. Thank you so incredibly much for bravely walking this long, emotional journey with me today. If Eleanor's powerful story of resilience, justice, and profound healing deeply resonated with your heart, please leave a comment down below. Tell me what specific part of this fierce story gave you the absolute most hope. Share your powerful thoughts. You're brave. Honest comment might be the exact lifeline another terrified woman desperately needs to read today. Please make sure to generously subscribe to the channel for more powerful, life-changing stories like this video. Share it widely with your friends, your sisters, and absolutely any woman who needs a massive reminder of her own incredible, unstoppable power. Fiercely protect your peace. Fiercely protect your brave heart. Fiercely protect your assets. Stay incredibly strong, and I will see you in the very next story. We often think of battles as loud, chaotic events. We imagine screaming. We imagine flying debris. But the most dangerous battles happen in absolute silence. They happen securely behind closed doors. They happen in the quiet spaces of our own homes. Financial abuse is a profound, devastating violation of fundamental human rights. It is never just about the money. It is about absolute, terrifying control. It is about systematically erasing a person's basic dignity. When someone intentionally steals your financial security, they are actively trying to steal your physical freedom. They are desperately trying to trap you. They are coldly telling you that your immense, daily sacrifices do not matter. They are treating you as a silent sponsor, not an equal human being. But you must remember something incredibly important today. Your dignity is your absolute birthright. It is not something you ever have to earn. It is not something a cruel partner can legally or morally take away. Eleanor's incredible journey teaches us the profound, devastating value of quiet patience. When they aggressively tried to humiliate her, she did not panic. She did not lower herself to their toxic, chaotic level. She meticulously gathered the hard truth. She held her ground. She fully understood that the absolute truth does not ever need to scream to be clearly heard. If you are currently walking through the dark, if someone is actively trying to convince you that you are entirely invisible, please deeply listen to my voice. You are a powerful, unstoppable force of nature. Your sacrifices are immensely valuable. Do not let a desperate coward convince you to surrender your immense power. Protect your internal peace. Demand absolute, unwavering respect. True partnership strictly requires true equality. You absolutely deserve a life built on pure respect. You deserve a beautiful, entirely free life. This content is meticulously researched, purposefully structured, and manually edited by our team to deliver profound meaning and valuable life lessons.